Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's me, Blorko. No, I'm kidding. It's me, Ope. How you doing? Um, I'm gonna try and get a couple videos out this week, even though I'm working my long stretch with the 13-hour shifts. But I saw videos coming out today from the other content creators, and I was at work, and I was recording videos on my phone at work of gameplay for a video. I'm gonna put two out today. The first one's going to be about the events that are happening this weekend. We have a guaranteed Void champion, Fortus, who is definitely this Lovecraftian inspired Knight Revenant, and I'm for it. He looks really cool. He's got the Davy Jones tentacle beard and stuff going on. He is a defense Void legendary, and the consensus currently right now is he is terrible. He is shit. We'll go over his kit. But Plarium already did say that they're going to buff him and buff his multipliers. So he actually does the damage that he's supposed to do. So let's look at his passive. Stars Align. His passive increases the chance of enemy skills failing by 15% when they are under fear or true fear. Right? That's kind of cool. The active effect is prevents his champion's death and keeps them alive at 1 HP when hit by a fatal hit, then removes all buffs and debuffs from this champion after preventing this champion's death, fully heals them, and fully depletes their turn meter. Then has an 80% chance placing fear debuff on all enemies for a turn. Finally, places a sleep debuff on this champion for one turn. This debuff cannot be resisted or blocked. So this is literally a Cthulhu like nod. You know, he Cthulhu slumbers, whatever the rhyme is under the deep. Blah blah blah. I mean, I like it. I'm not encyclopedic knowledge of it, but I know, right? Um, his A3 is Astral Terrors. It only pumps up damage. He'll attack everyone, ignore 30% of their defense if they have Fear or True Fear, and this attack is always critical against targets under Fear or True Fear. The damage of the skill increases by 10% for each Fear or True Fear, and this skill has a 40% chance to be unblocked for one turn whenever a Fear or True Fear debuff is placed on an enemy. So that's pretty cool, right? This sounds like it hits through unkillable and block damage buffs and shields and stuff like that. That's what this sounds like to me. His A2, Horrors Beyond, it's got, you can see there's tentacles in these two pictures here. That's pretty cool. Attacks all enemies, so he has another one that attacks all enemies. Has 80%, books up to 100 with a 3-turn booked cooldown of placing True Fear for one turn. This debuff cannot be resisted by targets under Fear debuffs. So, I mean, that one's kind of superfluous, honestly, because it's like, not really, you shouldn't be aiming for that. You shouldn't run two people placing Fear. It should just be one. Um, you know what I mean? And then we have his A1, which with the kit obviously places Fear to line up with the A2 and then to line up with Astral Terrors on his A3. But this one is called Taste of Oblivion. Attacks an enemy with a 35, books up to 50% chance of placing Fear. This attack will always be critical if the target is under Fear or True Fear. And he's a defensive damage based champion. And he has an aura that is ally crit rate in arena by 25%. He looks very cool. His moveset's really cool. He summons tentacles to attack. Very eldritch horror. It's fun. His base stats aren't terrible. Speed's about par for the course. Defense for defensive champion, that's about par for the course. HP's actually very decent, and obviously doesn't need attack. Crit rate 15 with crit damage 63% and a 40 on the resist. Okay, he's guaranteed after 80, right? But I want to show you the two Void champions that are on the times 10 this weekend that might change your mind, even though Fortus isn't very good right now. And we do have the promise they will buff him. It is a bit sneaky, though. But one of the champions that we're going to get that is new to the game here is going to be Andryssia, right? And she's kind of like this budget Necret. I have one booked out and leveled up. I haven't used her. She's not geared. She has no masteries, but I thought she was worth a look. If we just want to take a look at the base stats here real quick, again, she's a defensive base champion. Her speed is 102, crit rate 15%, crit damage 50, pretty standard. Resist 30 with an accuracy of 15, pretty standard. HP is very decent, and defense pretty good at 1288. Her passive is at the start of each turn, places an ally protection buff for 2 turns on the ally with the lowest max HP, and will not be placed on this champion. Also places strengthen and increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. So she's kind of like Necret, where she brings everything but block debuffs, but she's placing on herself and one other champion, and they're separate, right? So that's kind of cool. It's like a budget version. Her A3 is Pointed Justice. It's got a 3-turn cooldown when booked, and she'll attack all enemies and has a 100% chance when booked of decreasing the duration of all enemy buffs by 2 turns. Very cool. Increases the duration of all increased defense buffs on the allies by 1 turn. So you got kind of a Godseeker and Neri, but not as good and also not as bad. They're about par. They're about the same level, right? Where she's decreasing all their debuff or all their buffs by 2 turns and increasing only the increased defense buff on your team by a turn. She has an A2 and it attacks one enemy. When booked, has a 100% chance placing a stun for 1 turn if the target does not have any active buffs. Also has a 100% chance of placing stun debuff for 2 turns if the target does have any active buffs. Pretty cool. So she punishes the team as long as they don't have like a block debuffs up, right? And this book's down to a 3-turn cooldown. And then she has Consortius Bludgeon or Sensorcius Bludgeon. Attacks an enemy. 40% chance, looks like that books up to 70 of decreased crit damage on them, which is a whatever debuff. It really doesn't matter in the game for 2 turns. And as we can see, defense-based, defense-based, defense-based attacked. Very solid, right? But here's the one that might really change your mind. It's him. It's Big Man. It's the Mega Turtle. Myrtle, if you will. Krisk, the Ageless. I have one. I got lucky about like a year and a half ago. I got one out of Voids with my good old clan mate. He's gone now, Vaughn. Shout out Vaughn. Krisk is literally the best champion in the game, hands down, bar none. Nobody can even argue about it, right? We'll just go over if you guys don't already know. Speed's slow, but he needs to be because if he was faster, he'd be really overpowered. 94 speed. Defense is very good at 1520. HP is very good at 1900. Standard resist 50, actually 10. Let's look at his passive first. Might of the Ages. At the start of each round, he'll place a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns equal to 50% of his max HP. Has a 100% chance when booked of placing decreased defense and decreased attack for 1 turn when hit. These can be extended with masteries. And yeah, it's great. And it's at the start of the round. So if you're in an arena, it's the beginning of the fight. Right? Now, if you're in a dungeon and there's multiple waves, it's the beginning of each of the waves. When you're fighting clan boss, it's the start of the fight and that's it. Right? So just keep that in mind. Invincible Shell. Books to a 3-turn cooldown. He'll place Provoke on all enemies for 1 turn, and he gives himself increased defense for 2 turns and increased speed on all allies except him for 2 turns. Very good. This is his bread and butter, right? Other than his passive. Centuried Vigor. Right? Attacks all enemies, books to 3 turns, places 50% ally protection buff on all of them, except him for 2 turns, and then places 2 big continuous heal buffs on him for a turn, and increases duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Pretty good. This is actually what really makes him stand out in Clan Boss for the Infinity teams, when they can just go for like 100 turns on Ultra Nightmare. You know, him plus like a Godseeker or Neri or 2 Krisk or Landicus the Chosen. You know, you take your pick, right? And this does actually hit very hard. Multipliers are very good on this second skill. And his A1 is very good too. Like, there's nothing bad about Krisk. You can't nothing. He's got a clean record. He's like a politician that doesn't exist. See what I'm saying? His A1, Enter the Morass. Attacks all enemies, books up to a 50% chance of placing the big decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Very good. I love Krisk. I'd love a second one. That would make my day. And I really love his design. He's just this ancient tortoise man, and he's got all like this fabricated blades nailed to his shell with like armored trim, and then he's got these helmets down here of conquered foes. And you can see these are very much like Greek and Roman inspired helmets. I like that. Very good stuff. Let's get into the other ones here. Now, if I remember right, we'll look at another legendary. It's in the Dwarves, and it's also 10 times on Keeyra the Watcher. She is a defense-based champion. Base stats, again, very good. I don't want to keep going over everybody's base stats. It's going to make the video too long. Her passive is Besieger's Bane. Whenever an ally is attacked while under ally protection buff, it'll give the attacker a decreased attack buff for a turn. So that's like half of a Krisk passive, right? Not bad. And it's conditional on ally protection, unlike Krisk, where it's every time he's hit. We have her A3, Coordinated Defense, books down to a 3-turn, places ally protect on all allies except her for 2 turns, and also gives herself an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. That's pretty good. Krisk only gives it to himself. Keeyra gives it to everybody. That's pretty good. Smashing Spree, books to a 3-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies. When booked, has a 100% chance to decrease in duration of all enemy buffs by a turn. Also has a 100% chance when booked of placing a decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. That has become more important now as time goes on. She's very much a good contender for Bommel. You just bring her into Bommel, put high resistance and accuracy on her, and make her very tanky, and she's going to keep your team alive. I actually do wish I had her, because I would actually use her. Looks like she needs, 2, that's 7, 11 books is about average. Nothing on the passive. Falling Star Crush. Attacks an enemy, 50% chance, books up to 70 of placing decreased attack on them for 2 turns. So as you can also see, she's very good for Clan Boss as well, and Hydra Clan Boss, especially with the decreased accuracy. Alright. Let's see, let me look at my list over here. And I just want to see who else we're talking about. Okay. So another one right here, Kyoku. Now, I know she was a guaranteed champion. I never pulled for her, and I'm not going to pull any Sacreds this weekend or any Ancients because I am saving them. And Plarium knows everybody's saving them. That's why they're holding off on guaranteed Legendaries from Sacreds, because they know the player base is keeping at least 15. You know, we're learning. But they've realized people don't have voids right now, so they're trying to cash out on that, especially with the fusion starting next week. And we should probably get news of that tomorrow from the content creators. But we have Kyoku here. She's great. Good stats all around. She has an aura that's increased ally defense in all battles by 30%. Here's her passive. She's like a super seeker, where this passive is Wellspring, books to a 4-turn every time the champion is hit with a critical hit, heals all allies by 50% of their max HP, and then places an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns, right? Her A3 books down to 4 turns, places ally protection on everybody except her, and also places block damage on her, though, for 3 turns, and then grants her an extra turn. Really just makes it a 2-turn thing for block damage, but also really makes this like a 3-turn cooldown on Kyoku's Sword. Blood Curdle, she'll attack all enemies, and it is a 100% chance when booked of putting decreased attack on them after attacking, and has a 100% chance of placing HP burn on all enemies that this skill did not place decreased attack on. And then One-Eyed Beast attacks one enemy, will place 3 hits if the target is under 3 or more debuffs. Each hit has a 40% chance, books up to 50 of placing Weaken for 2 turns. So, and she's great everywhere, especially in Arena. I hate fighting Kyoku team. She's very annoying. I have to bring in like Ramanatu and stuff, and a Kaimar, and I really just try to hose them over with like a Mithrala, and then just use a Rotos as my backup just to like start sniping them down one by one, because this shit is annoying. Let me look at my list again. This guy I do have, and he is leveled. I don't think I have masteries on him or not, but he is new. There he is, the Hedgehog himself. Kind of looks like the one that was based off of the Witcher series. The books, if you remember, were more descriptive. But this is Sniktraak. He is from the Skinwalker faction. Looking at the base stats, he's looking okay. Defense is a little low for a legendary, but he is also HP based, not defense. And his HP is great at 22, almost 23,000. His aura is increased ally hit point in all battles by 33%, pretty standard. His passive is Soul Rot. Whenever an ally under a reflect damage buff is attacked, places Leech on the attacker for a turn. Also reflects 50% of the damage this champion receives back to the attacker, and then increases the amount of damage reflected by 20% from reflect damage buffs placed by allies. Okay, so that's pretty good. Vermin Vitae books to a 3-turn cooldown, places ally protect on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Also places 30% reflect damage buff on all allies for 2 turns, then heals this champion by 50% of their max HP. This is pretty good. Cloying Horror books to a 3-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, book to 100% chance of giving everybody decreased speed, the big one, and it'll also place a shield buff on allies equal to 30% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. The shield buff cannot be removed if it is placed when there are enemies under leech debuffs. So he's very good for Hydra, but as you can see, this A2 kind of conflicts with his passive here. and the Soul Rot, right? Well, actually, it goes with the Soul Rot, but kind of conflicts with his A3 here, because if you have shields on people, right, and you do a reflect damage, it doesn't count if it hits the shields, right, to my understanding. It has to be after the shields and directly to the HP bar. So we'll see how that goes. Misery Morningstar attacks an enemy, and he has a 60% chance of placing decreased attack. If the target is under leech, is a 100% chance to place decreased attack for 2 turns. And then all of his damage is based on HP, but his multipliers aren't anything to write home about. I think he looks cool. When I first saw him, I was like, yes, it's a white werewolf. But then I was like, oh, he's pretty spiky. And then it came out, yeah, he was fan-made. Pretty cool. Somebody in the player base made this guy. Designed him anyways. Let me look here, because I'm thinking that is all for the legendaries. Yep. So then let's go look at I already showed you the Void Epic. Let's go back down here to Shadowkin, and here we have a guy that's really good, honestly. But I wouldn't go out of my way to pull for him. Toragi the Frog is great. His base stats are pretty good for an Epic. His aura is resistant all battles by 40. His passive is what really makes him awesome, but his kit's just great, period. When attacked, he has a 50% chance placed. Now this can be increased to 55 with masteries, of placing a 5% poison debuff on the attacker for 2 turns each hit, right? So when the clan boss like hits twice or 3 times or whatever, he has 50% chance each time to place a poison debuff for 2 turns. That's pretty good. His A3 is called the Bog Blessing. It books down to a 3-turn cooldown. And the books increase the heal and the shield. Place a shield buff equal to 50% of this champion's max HP and 50% ally protection on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Also heals this champion by 25% of their max HP and places a 30% reflect damage buff on them for 3 turns. The heal increases by 2.5% for each poison debuff on the enemy team. That's pretty snazzy. And he is using the Infinity teams. Variations of them. His A2, which is Potent Stench, attacks all enemies. And it is booked to a 3-turn cooldown, but he has a 50% chance placing Provoke for a turn, and then the chance increases by 5% for each debuff on the enemy team. And you can use him in Spider. I've seen people use him in budget Spider teams, where he's very good. And then his A1, the Swamp Club, attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a decreased attack for 2 turns. And it books up to a 40%. So nothing crazy here. But Toragi is very good. I use him in Faction Wars. And then for the last 2, I'll save the best for last, but we'll go to the Ogren tribes right now. Steel Skull is an OG champion. He's used for some of the unkillable comps because he is a bait target for the Spirit Affinity. Base stats or whatever, but he is a bit faster than most of the epics that we've talked about. His resistance for his aura is in Faction Crypts by 45. His passive is Unshakable, decreases the duration of all debuffs on him by 1 turn at the start of each turn. And then his A2 is Stonewall, books to a 3-turn cooldown. He'll do ally protection on all of his allies except himself, and then he places counterattack on all allies except himself. And then he places Unkillable on this champion for a turn. And I mean, he's very good for that. And he's good for Clan Boss because this gets rid of the stun, right? Because the stun is for 1 turn, this decreases it by a turn, so it's null and void. So he gets to start his turn and just go rip shit riot as much as he can. He's kind of an OG champ. He's been power crept a lot, and counterattack buff has been power crept quite a bit. His smash attacks one enemy, and he'll place heal reduction if the target's defense is lower than this champion's. Alright, there you go. That's Skullcrusher. I wouldn't pull for him. I remember there was a tourney like 2 years ago where you could get a Skullcrusher if you like took first or whatever, and then I think the person that took first in the world got a Valkyrie, if I remember that right. But like I said, best for last. We're gonna bring down to essentially a legendary and an epic skin, Miscreated Monster. Now he was released about 2 years ago for the Halloween champs, and his base stats are great. His aura is increased ally hit point in the arena by 33%. This would just be better suited, I think, if they errated this and just made it for all battles and not 33, put it like 25, more epic level. Spooky Groan is his passive. He'll place a fear on the attacker for a turn whenever an ally is attacked while under an ally protection buff. It's pretty good. You can set him up with Fortus. It's alive. 6 turn, books to a 4, places ally protecting all allies except this champion for 3 turns, so there's a 1 turn in between. And then heals this champion by 50% of their max HP, places a continuous heal on this champion for 3 turns. This is one of his best skills, if not the best, and it's Lightning Storm, books to a 3 turn cooldown, and it attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a stun debuff for a turn. This can be brought up with masteries in the defense tree at the very bottom. And then places shield buff on all allies for 3 turns equal to 25% of the damage inflicted. Now, I used him a lot in Spider before I got like a sub, 20-second Spider 20 team. And then before we went up, you can even use him on Spider 25 in some comps for an HP burn strat. Because if you give him, let's say, War Master, and he does a ton of damage to all the Spiderlings, it is a crazy shield that he puts on everybody. I mean, they're not going to die if the shield is on, right? And then he stuns, too. So you stun like half the Spiderlings, theoretically. And then his A1 is Meaty Fists. I, myself, am cursed with sausage fingers. So I know this attack. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 15% chance. This is up to 25. Placing stun for a turn. And then has a 50% chance of placing decreased defense. Debuff for 1 turn if the stun debuff if it is placed. And I assume this book's up to 60% chance with that. So that is all the champions, right, that are going to be on the times 10 for the weekend. But do remember, we have an event coming up next week. So be smart. Save your resources. This is bait, right? Cue in Mad Max doing this right now. Okay. All right. But I do also want to point out that there's a Summon Rush event, and we usually get, legendary books with this. And with this Halloween Deck of Fate, we don't know what we're going to have to do to get the points for the Halloween Deck of Fate. It would be great, and it would be super bait, is if they were like, listen, you get points for summoning for this event. Even though the trailer showed for that Halloween Deck of Fate that they previewed was like getting artifacts and upgrading them. And like all the rewards were pretty much poop. And they're showing us that these rewards aren't very much to write home about either. But if you're playing the game, you're doing it already, it's passive resources, right? So always go for passive resources if they align with your play. But the Summon Rush comes in handy too. So let's say, all right, I'm going to open 80 Void Shards to get Fortus. Now, if you're close to Mercy, you could be getting another legendary along the way, and since it's 10-time Krisk, you could get a Krisk along the way, right? I think it's roughly a 25% chance that if you get a legendary during a 10 times for Voids, it's going to be the designated 10 times, because there's such a smaller pool for Void champions, all right? Check my math on that, though. But like I said, it's like a double-edged sword. There's, I'm leaning half and half. Like, should you do this? Should you not? Make the choice to yourself, all right? But that's all for today. I want you to have a wonderful day, and I'll catch everybody next week. See ya.